Hi, my name's Matt Sevenoaks, and in this video I'm going to be guiding you through the BROFF model, which will help you to have more effective feedback conversations. So what the BROFF model pretty much consists of is 5 key aspects. So the B is for behavior, the R is for reasons, the O is for outcome, the F is for feelings, and then the final F is about talking about the future. So we'll go through each of those in turn. And so what I'd suggest you do is grab a pen and pencil, because in the first section, what I'd like you to do is to sit down for a moment and just write down somebody's name who you really would like to be giving feedback to right now. So somebody where their current behavior isn't serving you or the people around you particularly well. So welcome back. So hopefully you've now got the name of an individual where their behaviour is something that you would like to see a shift in. And so we'll now start off with the first of the BROFF model, which is B for behaviour. So what we need you to do is to think about the specific behaviours that this person is showing, ideally recently, and which you yourself have witnessed. So if you don't give feedback that's specific, it can be quite vague, and as a consequence, the person doesn't really know what it is that needs to change. So if you can ideally think of a recent example and can think of things which you'd like to see them stop doing or perhaps start doing differently, think about the sorts of behaviours which show that that change is required in this individual. And ideally have it be something that's very much something that you yourself have seen, because if you're reporting on behalf of somebody else, it's quite easy for the individual to deny that it happened, and because you weren't there, it's difficult for you to dispute that should the person deny it. So with your pen now, spend a few moments just jotting down specific behaviours which you've seen the person have recently, which are not serving you or those around you. Okay, so you'll now have a few examples of behaviours that you've seen this person demonstrate. And now we move on to R, which is about inviting that person to share their reasons for why they may have behaved in that way. It can be quite easy for us when we're giving somebody feedback to assume the intent that the person had for behaving the way they did, and we kind of develop assumptions and stories as to why they were behaving in the way they did. But sometimes there can be completely different underlying reasons as to why that person is behaving how they are, and it's really important that you give them the opportunity to share those reasons at the beginning of the conversation. So for the person that you're currently thinking about giving feedback to, perhaps just spend a couple of moments noting down the possible reasons that you would immediately assume would be why they're behaving the way they are, and then take a moment to reflect on what potential other reasons that you haven't yet considered might be factors. And this is just to give you a clearer sense of the fact that we can't predict why somebody is behaving the way they are. So just spend a few moments noting that down. Okay, so now you've noted down some potential reasons for why the person's behaving the way they are, both things that you would instantly assume and hopefully a few things which you haven't considered previously. And the reason for that is just to give you an insight into the value in asking for those reasons from a person. And so please do make sure that when you speak to that person, you invite them to share their reasoning for why they're behaving the way they are. And now we can move on to O, which is outcome. So outcome is all about explaining the impact that this person's behavior is having on you, on the wider team that perhaps they work with, potentially on customers, and potentially on the broader business as well. So their behavior might be impacting on costs, on efficiency, on sales. So if there's broader business impacts, that's important to highlight to the individual as well, because they might not be making the link between their behavior and then the effects or the outcome that it's having on the people around them. So what I'd like you to do now is just to spend a few moments noting down what is the impact that their behavior is having on you individually, if it is having an impact, on their wider team, and then on the wider organization, whether that be in relation to costs, customers, or other stakeholders within the organization that they work in. Okay, so now you've got a list of the sorts of impacts that the person's behavior is having on those around them. Now that takes us on to the first F, which is about feelings. And so it's really important to ask the person how they feel once they've actually heard this feedback around their behaviors, had the chance to give their reasons for that behavior, and then they're starting to hear the impact or the outcomes that their behavior is having on others. The reason for this is because if the person's experiencing emotions such as denial or frustration around the feedback, then if you immediately jump into talking to them about what sort of changes you want to see, they're not really yet bought into the change that's required. They're still experiencing some sort of emotional resistance to the change that's required. And so it can be helpful to talk to them about why they feel the way they do and have them be able to air that emotion first before you move on to the idea of thinking about what the future state could look like. However, if the person's perhaps slightly embarrassed or surprised or eager to hear more, then perhaps you can then move on to talking to them about what the future could look like. But not until you've assessed how they're actually feeling can you make that judgment about whether it's ready to talk about what kind of change you want to see. So for a moment, I'd just like you to consider how the person you are thinking of giving this feedback to might feel once you give them the feedback that you've noted down, and then quickly brainstorm, depending on their different emotional reactions, what your initial response might be to them then based on the different emotional reactions that they might have. Okay, so now you've thought about the ways that the person may react when you ask them how they feel, and then what your responses might be depending on what that emotion is that they're feeling. And then the final F is the future state. So this is all about giving them very specific guidance around what sort of future behaviors you would like to see from them, and then inviting them to co-create solutions on how that could actually take place. So the more you can have them get involved in co-creating how they make that future a reality, the more likely they are to buy into that change and actually want to make it happen for themselves rather than feeling as though they're being told what to do. So you're empowering them by asking them to come up with ideas on how they could actually implement the new behaviors that are expected. But it really is important that you give them very crystal clear guidance around what the specific behaviors would be in the future that you would consider to be good and which you consider would then have a positive impact and positive outcomes either on you or on the team or on the wider business when you reflect on the O section of the BROFF model. So what I'd like you to do now is just spend a couple of minutes thinking through what the future state needs to look like and be as specific as you can. So if there's behaviors you need them to start exuding, please list those. If there's specific behaviors you need them to absolutely stop doing going forwards, then please list down those. And if there's any behaviors which they actually do which are very positive and linked to this, and you want to encourage them to still bring those in the future, then note down those as well. So welcome back. So now you've gone through the entire BROFF model, and what you should now have is a list of the behaviours you want to see change in the person that you're going to be giving the feedback to, ideas on how you're going to ask them for their reasons for behaving in the way they do, an idea of what the outcomes are and the impact that their behaviour is having on you and others and the wider business. You've also started to reflect on how you might respond to them depending on how they may feel having received this feedback. And then you've also got some very clear ideas around what specific behaviours you want to see from them in the future, and potentially some ideas on questions you might ask them that would invite them to co-create what that future could look like. So hopefully you found that useful, and it will help you have an effective feedback conversation with not only the person that you're thinking of, but people in future too. Thank you.